A predator-free New Zealand? What a great idea. A utopian vision requiring the kind of focus and resources you'd need to put a man back on the moon. Where there's a will, there's a way. But is there the will? How many rats, stoats, weasels, possums, feral cats would need to die? Still, all he can do is his bit here in this slice of Eden, once a week, regular as clockwork, tramping deep into the native bush around Dolores Bridge to check and reset the traps, do a body count, and try against the odds to save a tiny native long-tailed bat from extinction, even if it is the ugliest little bastard you ever saw. Plus it gets him out of the house, breathing fresh air, staving off his dotage and the old worries that sometimes slink in, except the air isn't so fresh. Something stinks today for sure, ripe as. He can hear flies buzzing too. It must be a relatively fresh feast. He realizes he's been holding his breath. Not from the smell, but from something more primal. Fear has crept under the skin and taken hold, like the delicate fungi on a dead bark. Bob reaches the clearing, moss sponging and twigs cracking under his hiking boots. He edges around the tundra to get a better look. The body is sitting propped against the tree as if just taking a rest, held in place by a rope around the neck and around the tree trunk. A deer, female he's guessing, blanketed by flies and maggots. Liquids, dark and viscous, have seeped out. The face and front are open to the world. Bob fights the urge to spew, but it's not like he hasn't come across such a scene before. A rustle and crunch behind him, ferns lift and a figure steps through in backwoods gear. You! Where there's a will, there really is a way. Of course there is. There always was and would be. Bob waves his hand sadly at the deer corpse. Poor bugger's come a cropper. Shame, says the visitor, nodding. Count the seconds. A sob of anguish. Oh, God. Then a sound somewhere between a thump and a cough, barely enough to disturb the blowflies.
Welcome to the Good Reading Magazine podcast. Good Reading is a monthly magazine dedicated to books and reading and aims to help readers discover their next favourite book. You can find out more about the books discussed on today's podcast at goodreadingmagazine.com.au.
Hello and welcome back to the Good Reading Podcast. I'm Max Lewis, and today we're joined by Alan Carter, talking about his new book, Doom Creek, the second book in the Sergeant Nick Chester series, which began with Marlborough Man in 2017. Doom Creek sees Nick living the quiet life in the Wakamarina Valley before new threats emerge in the form of trigger-happy Americans preparing for doomsday, a bizarre cold case murder, and a scandal-plagued religious sect. Alan, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'm great to be with you.
Doom Creek is your second novel following Sergeant Nick Chester. What made you want to return to his character and the criminal underbelly of the Marlborough Sounds in New Zealand?
I think after Marlborough Man got such a positive reception, winning the Nairo Marsh Award when it came out and getting lots of good reviews, plus being printed also in Germany, it seemed like the series had legs. I was enjoying the different style of writing from my other series, which is WA set. The Marlborough Man Nick Chester series is, obviously you've got a very different setting and different characters, but it's got a different energy, it seems also to me, with the first person present. It feels sometimes more immediate. Plus I had quite a few things to get off my chest as well, and this was a good vehicle for that.
I guess a lot of readers might not have read Marlborough Man, so I guess the question is, should they check out the first book before delving into Doom Creek? Is there a lot of continuity that they might miss, or could they just jump into this one?
All of my books are written with the idea that you can read that book alone and get plenty from it.
Okay.
But yes, by all means, I'm happy to have more sales, so if people would like to buy the first book, that would be great. I mean, the basic idea from Marlborough Man was of a former undercover cop from the UK whose undercover work has gone badly wrong and he's had to take up witness protection in remote New Zealand. So he has some old UK gangsters on his trail, as well as a predator on the loose in the spectacular Marlborough Sounds where he lives. And in Doom Creek, having vanquished his demons from Marlborough Man, that's a spoiler if you like, he is hoping to settle down into the quiet life in small town New Zealand, but obviously that's not to be because there's a new gold rush on in his beloved Wakamarina Valley, and There's a bunch of American doomsday preppers have moved into the area to use it as a bolt hole from the mad times that we're all living in.
What inspires you to look at, I guess, the intrusion of alt-right US politics into the kind of picturesque setting of New Zealand?
It was a real thing. I was living in the Wakamarina Valley when Trump got into power in November 2016, and being 10 kilometers up a dead-end valley on the other side of the world felt like a really good place to be at that point.
I'll bet, yeah.
It still does, actually.
Yeah.
But it seemed that I wasn't the only person thinking that way. There were quite a few stories have emerged from then of particularly cashed up American, mainly billionaires, a few millionaires, buying up land in New Zealand and setting up doomsday bolt holes. A number of stories emerged of kind of panic rooms and private airstrips and big properties down towards Queenstown and elsewhere. So it was a thing, and I thought it would be useful to apply that to my beloved Wakamarina.
Looking at those themes of white supremacy and the availability of guns in New Zealand, readers might draw some parallels between the book and the horrific Christchurch mosque shootings that occurred in March 2019. Although, if I'm not mistaken, you had actually completed a draft or two of the book well before that had happened.
That's right. I had finished the first of several drafts of the book before that happened, and it was a horrible, enormous shock to us all, but particularly for the people of New Zealand. It was the last place I would have imagined something of that kind of thing happening. I didn't intend to suddenly change the book to fit that in, but I think a number of the themes in the book of the politics and the availability of those kind of weapons, I think kind of foreshadows what was to come. So the book is a foreshadowing of that kind of thing and of the state of the world that we have today, which seems at times quite apocalyptic.
When books engage with these sort of political themes, sometimes readers complain a bit about making things too political when they just want to sit down and read a nice book and not be reminded of current events. Were you worried at all about receiving such criticism?
It's always a fine line my primary aim is to entertain. That is the idea, and that I hope to keep on achieving. But I do have access to grind, and I do have thoughts on the world, and I think the crime fiction is a useful vehicle for, if you like, holding up a mirror to society. But this was another good opportunity for doing that. But yes, you don't want to be preaching to people. The main thing is that people enjoy the ride.
Do you think crime fiction writers maybe have a duty to kind of do that mirror holding for their readers?
I wouldn't necessarily call it a duty. Each writer probably chooses what they want to write. Some can quite happily just do as a great, thrilling, suspenseful ride with no particular social comment in it, and that's fine. We all need an escape from things. Others try to have the odd thing to say within the plot. Very often the crimes in crime fiction do say something about the society that they're based in, and then not necessarily present day either. Sometimes they have a historical perspective on things as well. But for me, I've in all of my books, I've attempted to try and include some element of some mirror of what's going on in society, because I think these are things which I'm interested in, and I think that crime is a really good vehicle for looking at that in an entertaining and informative way.
On that note, as a crime writer who focuses on police procedure and has main characters that are police officers, I was curious how you felt about that in light of the increased scrutiny that's come on police worldwide in light of the Black Lives Matters protests and stuff like that. How do you feel about portraying cops in your books after this kind of scrutiny that's come out?
Yeah, I think portraying cops unapologetically as kind of heroes and saviors just really doesn't cut it. Not just these days, but it probably never has. We all know that there are corrupt and bad cops out there, but we also know that there are heroes and heroines who are kind of truth seekers, if you like. I'm always interested in somebody who is trying to work within that system, maybe sometimes breaks rules while they're doing it. I think most crime fiction writers are well aware of that line that they're treading, and any who would continue to unquestioningly have all cops are good and all villains are bad, black and white world, if you like, that would be very naive and unreal.
On the note of that, why don't you focus on our protagonist of Doom Creek, Nick Chester? How did you want to evolve his character from Marlboro Man?
I think in Marlboro Man, he's because he's living in hiding. When we first meet him, he's obviously very paranoid and very impetuous and a bit unstable, if you like. In Doom Creek, he's trying to settle down and get a handle on things and make a go of his new life on this other part of the world. And in so doing, he reacts pretty strongly to the people who are trying to trash the environment around him and who want to disrupt that quiet life he's hoping to have. But I've made him less promiscuous in the second book, so he's better behaved. And also he's got his own personal health crisis to face during this book, which makes him a lot more vulnerable and just draws up a whole different level to what we know about him.
I felt that the character of the Marlborough Sounds and Wakamarina Valley is as much of a character as Nick Chester in the book, and now with 2 books set in that setting. How does it compare to writing about Western Australia and Fremantle in your other series?
It's certainly a lot cooler and greener. Yes, I mean, having lived in both places, both of them have very much their positives and their negatives. The water's really cold in New Zealand for swimming in, being an open water swimmer. So I really appreciate the water and the beaches in WA and then the brightness and everything. I'm certainly have found in New Zealand that kind of wow factor of the landscape, not just in terms of the spectacular nature of it, but it's also still relatively young, if you like, in geological terms. So the occasional rumbles of mini and sometimes major earthquakes. Basically, it's a land that's kind of it's a little less stable, and for that I also found interesting. I was there during the Kaikoura earthquake and was shaken out of my bed by that, and that was, for me, it was a major event. I'd never experienced that before, and it was pretty full on. Just to be and the floods that happened there, and it's a really full on, amazing landscape. So it was very easy to write about, very evocative, very inspiring.
Do you also find it, approaching it from the angle of a crime writer, a nice source of contrast between the beautiful, picturesque location and the more gritty, morbid crime details that you can kind of weave in underneath it?
Oh, for sure, yeah. I mean, you've got, it's a very moody landscape. You've got mist and fog rolling around the hills. It's probably, there should really be it would match for Scandi noir, if you like, in terms of landscape. It does become a character of itself, where a whole mood can be evoked by basically looking out of the window. So to have that, plus the history of the country, and the Wakamarina Valley, which 150 odd years ago had its gold rush, which trashed the river, and it's amazing to see that it could have recovered from what happened way back then. And it also shows why Nick has this dismay about such a thing returning to try and to threaten once again that environment. So it's a very fragile environment, and that fragility and the mood and the instability, they're all things that, fragile, unstable, moody characters and real people. That's the essence of not just crime fiction, but writing generally, I think.
And you're currently living in Tasmania, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right, yeah.
Do you have any plans to set a crime book in Tasmania, and do you think it would offer similar kinds of creative freedom as writing in New Zealand does?
I doubt if I could handle yet another series of books. I think New Zealand and WA, it's probably enough to be juggling. There's lots of similarity between the landscape in Tasmania and that in New Zealand. What I've done as a halfway house is that the next WA series, the Kato Kwong series, that the new book for that would be coming out next year, and there is a Tasmanian setting for at least part of the book.
Okay.
So I did use my local environments to include that. But I've got no plans for a complete new Tassie set series now. But never say never.
On the topic of the Kato Kwong series, you mentioned this a little bit before, but I wanted to ask how differently you approach the Nick Chester series as opposed to the Kato Kwong series. Are there many differences in your writing practice and how you sort of plot things out?
I think the Kwong character is probably a lot more cerebral than Nick Chester is. He's more sensitive, thoughtful, and less out there character than Chester, but he still, gets things done. But he's developing along the way as well. He plays the piano, does cryptic crosswords, all that kind of stuff, and he's a bit of a thinker. And so it's a different mood when I'm writing that. Plus, with the more reflective third person past tense, again, it's a different energy to the writing compared to Nick Chester's, which is more immediate. And in your face, in my face anyway. Sometimes the politics or the social commentary, I think, is different as well. I think with the Nick Chester series, there's either a global or an environmental aspect to what's going on. And I think with the WA series, there is a more immediate sense of the Australian politics, which has its own foibles and own characters and its own ugliness as well, if you like.
Do you think the Nick Chester series is maybe a bit more palatable in that sense for international audiences than the Kato Kwong series?
In some regards, it probably has it'd be more accessible. Perhaps the Kwong series might be more inward looking of Australia itself. In terms of palatability, I mean, I'm reading books from authors all around the world, and they're very much focused on their own country, their own society, their own stuff that's going on, and I still find that interesting. So I'm not put off by that. But, no doubt some readers could be. But I think certainly the Nick Chester series possibly has that slight more accessibility in terms of the more universal issues, if you like.
On that note, before we finish up, I wanted to ask if we could perhaps get any hints on whether we can expect a new Nick Chester book and where he might be taking us.
Well, I suppose there's a kind of a mini spoiler. Nick will survive Doom Creek. And so, yes, I do have plans for another one that's twinkling in my eye. I'm not far into it yet, but I do have plans to take him further for sure. As to when that will happen, we're probably something in the next 24 months. We might see evidence of that.
All right. Well, looking forward to it. Thanks so much for joining us today, Alan.
Thank you, Max.